Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to cover Bhava Karakas, also known as house significators. All right, so again, this is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology. If you're new to Vedic astrology, Jyotish, or my videos, all my teaching videos on the subject are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means I have a teaching video on that topic if you'd like to learn more. And if you'd like to learn astrology by looking at birth charts, I have a video titled Birth Chart Archive List 2024. I list all the famous birth charts I've analyzed on the channel. So famous people, famous places, famous moments in time. And then the videos you can find them in, because you can't always tell from the titles of my video that they're like famous birth charts that I've analyzed. Like my monthly videos, I typically do like 3 famous videos, but you can't tell from the title that that's in there. So videos to watch with this one to get more out of this talk, North, South, and East Indian style charts. I also cover Western style charts in that talk. Introduction to navigating a birth chart. Introduction to the constellations or Rashis. Constellation or Rashi categories. I have a whole playlist on planets and Grahas. Now that's super important because we're talking about planet symbols here. So I have videos on each of the planets or Grahas and the symbolism of them so that you understand the matching up here of the planets and houses. Then I have a whole playlist on the houses and bhavas where I've covered the symbolism of each house or bhava. It's also super important for this concept I'm teaching today. Also, because of the charts the examples I'm going through, it'd be important to look at Karka Bhavanasha or planet breaking house, planetary combustion or Asta, planetary war or Graha Yuddha, and then planetary exaltation, debilitation or Ucha Nisha. Okay, so Bhava Karakas are also known as house significators. And Bhava means house and Karaka means symbol. So essentially what you're doing is you're analyzing the planet or planets that most represent the significations of a house to get more information about what the house is going to potentially produce. Okay. So you can see on the right here, I have a chart. This is a North Indian style chart. I haven't put in the little numbers in the corners because it kind of doesn't matter. Those little numbers in the corners are really to determine the Rashi or constellation, and that's not really uh, so significant in this part of the talk. Okay, so what we see here is that in each house, and this is a North Indian style chart. So the top diamond in the middle, where you see that SU stands for sun. That's the first house, also known as the Lagna, also known as the Ascendant or rising sign. Okay, so that's the first house, and to get to the other houses, you count counterclockwise. So then if you go up and to the left, you'll see the JU there. JU stands for Jupiter, and so Jupiter is in the second house of this North Indian style chart. Okay. Now, the reason why I have these little, abbreviations here, like SUJ or whatever, these are the Bhava Karakas or house significators for each of these houses. Right. Now on the left, I have a list of them and more of like the logic behind why these are the house significators. So what does that mean? So for example, the first house here, the house significator is Sun. So even if Sun is not in the first house, even if Sun is not the ruling planet of the first house, to understand fully what the first house will give, good, bad, sideways, whatever. We also want to consider, where is the sun and the condition of the sun? Because the sun represents, as you see in the list now, if we go to list, sun represents things like health, vitality, and sense of self, as does the first house. So of all the planets, and there are 9 classic planets in Jyotish or Vedic astrology, we only use 7 of those for house karakas or bhava karakas. We don't use Rahu and Ketu, the north and south nodes of the moon. Okay, so the 7 planets, other planets, we use as karakas. So the sun represents health, vitality, sense of self, and so does the first house. So the sun is a planet that gives some indications of additional indications or subtlety to what the first house will produce for somebody's life. Okay. Then if we look at the second house where that JU is for standing for Jupiter, Jupiter is the Bhava Karaka for the second house. Now, Jupiter represents things like wealth, family, especially children, oration, oral speech, and so does the second house. Second house represents like wealth, especially assets, family, inner circle, and oral communication. So Jupiter is the Bhava Karaka house significator, or the planet significating the house for any chart. Okay, so that's part of the reason why I didn't put the little, designations for, is this a Aries rising or Scorpio rising or Libra rising or whatever, because this Karaka, it does not is not related to the constellations and Rashis. However, once we get into analysis, then we start integrating all that information. But just as a Bhava Karaka, if we just do straight Bhava Karakas, Sun is a Bhava Karaka for the first house, Jupiter is a Bhava Karaka for the second house. And if we move on to the third house, you can see Mars in the third house. So what are things that Mars represents? Siblings, courage, enterprise, like innovation. Yeah. The third house represents siblings, courage, innovation, physical action. Yeah. And if we look at the fourth house here, we have several. So you can see in this, Bhava Karaka placement chart, all of the houses have one major planet Bhava Karaka, except for the fourth and the 10th house. The fourth and the 10th house have several. You can see four actually each. Okay. So for the fourth house, the four Bhava Karakas are Moon, Venus, Mercury, and Mars. Now, why is this? Because Moon represents mother and emotions, such as happiness, and the fourth house represents mother and happiness. Okay. Now, why is it Venus here? Venus represents vehicles, and the fourth house represents vehicles. Then Mercury. Okay, why is Mercury here? Because Mercury represents education, and the fourth house represents education. So Mars is here as well, as it is in the third house. Mars is here because Mars represents property, and the fourth house represents property. Starting to see the picture here? Okay. So let's just go through. So the fifth house, we have Jupiter again. The reason why is Jupiter represents children, advice, intuition, wisdom, and punya, or good karma. And these are also things that the fifth house represents. Now you have to be careful, okay, because you can see like Mars in the third house, okay? Like I just have it here just to represent as a Bhava Karaka, but if you had Mars, actually Mars in the third house of any chart, that would also create a Karko Bhavanasha, which will change the interpretation. The other thing is Jupiter here in the fifth house. If the Jupiter was actually in the fifth house, Jupiter doesn't have to be in the fifth house to understand what the Bhava Karaka is. I mean, Jupiter could be in any house here. I'm just again giving you a visual, interpretation of this information on the left here. If you had Jupiter in the fifth house, that would also be a Karka Bhavanasha Jupiter. And if you want to learn more about Karka Bhavanasha, I have a video on that. Okay. So keep going on here. So the sixth house here, we've got Mars again. So why is Mars here? Well, Mars represents things like acute disease and enemies. So does the sixth house. Accidents, injuries. So they both line up here. Then the seventh house here, we have Venus in the seventh house as the Bhava Karaka. Venus represents marriage, it represents relationships, it represents love, and the seventh house represents those things as well. So Venus is the Bhava Karaka for the seventh house. Again, Venus does not have to be in the seventh house for the Bhava Karaka to exist. The Bhava Karaka always exists. So no matter where Venus is in the chart, and we'll see once we get in. Once I start talking about how to analyze this stuff, I'm just giving you the list, the simple list to start out with, so know which planets represent, or the Bhava Karakas for the houses. Okay, but you can see here Venus could also be a Karka Bhavanasha, which would change the interpretation. So you also don't want to confuse the again Bhava Karakas with the Bhavanasha. Okay, then the eighth house here we have Saturn as the Bhava Karaka, because Saturn represents things like long-term disease, long-term problems, losses of all kinds, even death. I mean, pretty serious long-term stuff here. Saturn is the planet representing that stuff, and so is the eighth house. Okay. So that's why Saturn is the Bhava Karaka for the 8th house. Then the 9th house, we have Jupiter again. Why is Jupiter in that? The Bhava Karaka for the 9th house, Jupiter represents things like higher education, spirituality, teacher, guru, law, and government. Those are all things that the 9th house represents. Okay, then the 10th house, again, we have a multiplicity here of Bhava Karakas. So Mercury is here because it represents commerce, as does the 10th house. Sun is here because it represents career, fame, and authority, as does the 10th house. Saturn is here because it represents industry and employment, as does the 10th house. Right? The 10th house represents things like, what are the activities you do during the day, like 9 to 5 activities, yeah. Then Jupiter is there because Jupiter represents classic professions such as doctor, lawyer, accountant, that sort of thing. Okay. In the 11th house, we have Jupiter again. So you can see, like, Jupiter is a Bhava Karaka 5 times here. So for anybody's chart, the condition of their Jupiter is going to be, pretty important for a lot of things in their life. And Jupiter is the great benefic. Jupiter also, again, represents good karma. So if Jupiter's super strong, they're going to get a lot more. Jupiter's going to produce a lot more. The fruits of Jupiter are going to produce a lot more. And good fruits, not, rotten fruits or fruits you can't eat, right? So Jupiter again in the 11th house. Why is that? Because both of them, the 11th house and Jupiter, represent elder siblings, friends, and gains. In the 12th house, we have Saturn here again, because Saturn and the 12th house can both represent solitude, loss, endings, and foreign places, foreign things. Okay, so this is just, again, a simple list of the Bhava Karakas, the planets, and which houses they symbolize, and a little logic as to why. Okay, now we'll move on to more kind of interpretation stuff here. Okay. Well, actually, one more thing before we start the analysis portion. This is basically the same information as a previous slide, just organized, like the part on the left is organized by planet instead of house. So, like the sun is the Bhava Karaka for the 1st and the 10th. The moon is a Bhava Karaka for the 4th. Mars is a Bhava Karaka for the 3rd, the 4th, and 6th house. Mercury is a Bhava Karaka for the 4th and the 10th. Jupiter again, Bhava Karaka for 5 houses here, 2, 5, 9, 10, 11. Venus Karaka for 4 and 7. Saturn Karaka for 8, 10, and 12. Okay. So again, what I've circled in purple here, the two outlier, kind of unusual houses are the 4th and 10th houses because they have multiple karakas here, depending on which specific thing you're analyzing. And then again, Rahu and Ketu are not Bhava Karakas. Okay, now we'll get into the analysis. Okay, so what do we do with all this information? Like, how do we integrate this into an interpretation, when we're looking at somebody's chart? Okay, so first of all, you have to figure out which area of life you want to look at. Okay, so I have a little mini mock-up here, and it's simplified. Okay, so let's just look at the chart for a second here. So now I've put a designation in here to find out, what kind of rising sign chart this is. So I have a 1 in the bottom corner of the 1st house, also known as the Lagna, Ascendant, rising sign. So again, that diamond in the middle from a North Indian style chart. And then you count counterclockwise. So that little 1 in the bottom corner means the first zodiac sign, or Aries, also known as Mesha in Sanskrit. Okay, so this is an Aries rising chart. Okay, and we have Sun in the 1st house here. Okay. Now, okay, so just to again orient you to the chart. Now let's look at the rules here. So when we're evaluating a bhava, so this is considered part of bhava analysis, house analysis. Okay, so there's an 80-20 rule here. Okay, so 80% is 40. Well, you kind of break that into 2 parts. So for most of the time, the bhava, we look at the bhava like the planet, for example, the planets in the bhava in the house, and the planets aspecting the house, and the condition of all these things. Okay, this is the 40% bhava is typically what we see. So that's a pretty heavy, dose of influence here in terms of what the house is going to give. Then the next 40%, so the 40 plus 40 here makes the 80%. So the bhava and the lord of the house, so the uh, dispositor of the house. Okay, so that's 80%. So the majority of the influence of what a house can give most of the time is between the house and the lord of the house. So the lord of the house, you want to know, did that go to a positive or negative house? And what's the condition of that lord? Is it with a bunch of malefics or benefics? Is it debilitated, exalted, combust, at war? All these things. Is it strong? Is it weak? Is it positive, negative? Okay. Then this last 20% here, this is where your karaka stuff comes in that we're talking about now. So 80%, if you just look at the house, if you just look at the lord of the house, you'll get 80% most of the time, not all the time. There's an exception. I'm going to talk about that. There are exceptions to this, but 20%, the additional 20% of nuance, subtlety. And again, if you know this 80-20 rule, right, this 20% can be significant even though it doesn't seem that much. It's like that, what is that 80-20 rule, like, your closet or whatever, like you only wear 20% of the clothes in your closet. So 20% is a good working functional number. Okay, so not insignificant here. Okay, so that's why we're talking about it today. So this karaka, again, where did the karaka go? Right, did it go to a positive or negative house? What condition is it? Is it combust? Is it debilitated? Is it exalted? Is it with malefics? Is it with, benefics? Is it eclipsed? Combust, all these things, okay? So we're going to use this little mini mock-up chart on the right as an example. So again, we have an Aries or Mesha Lagna, Ascendant, Rising Sign. Lagna, Ascendant, Rising Sign. These are all first house. These are all different names for the same thing. So let's just say for this partial Aries chart here, we wanted to analyze children and we wanted to analyze marriage. Okay, so let's take children first, okay? So again, the 80-20 rule. 40% is the Bhava. So for children, house representing children is the fifth house. So we would want to look at what's going on in the fifth house. Okay, we have the moon there. The moon is going to be bright because you can see it's coming into fullness here. It's going to be 180 degrees from the sun in a few days from this birth chart. Okay, so that's a bright moon. That's a strong moon. It gives the moon strength. And since we have an Aries rising chart, then you can count. So first constellation, the first house, then we go up and back, second, third, fourth, fifth. The fifth house here is ruled by Leo. Okay, Leo is ruled by the sun, and Leo is a friendly sign to moon. So that's going to give additional strength, a little bit more strength to moon. So this is a pretty strong moon. We don't know about, I didn't put in here Mercury, and I didn't put in here Rahu and Ketu. If Rahu and Ketu were on this moon, that would bring it down. Okay, potentially. But the moon so far is looking, pretty good here, fairly strong. Okay. So since the moon is fairly strong, that would give some indication here potentially that this person has, some positive karma, or if they were interested in having children, there is some likelihood based on this alone. And again, this isn't the full story, that, just by the moon being here and being strong, there's an indication that this person would probably have children. Then we want to look at the Lord of the house. So again, the Lord of the house is Leo, and Leo is ruled by the sun. So where is the sun gone? Well, what's going on with the sun? Sun has gone to a positive house, so that's strong, that's good. And sun is exalted in Aries. Okay, so it's a very strong sun. So a very strong sun, a pretty strong moon. So, and we do have one malefic on the sun, Mars here. But otherwise, I mean, but overall, and the thing is, but when Mars, aspects sun, Mars is going to be in it is swa in its own sign. So this is a lot, the sun is going to be exalted and Mars is going to be swa. So this is a very strong sun here. Super strong sun, fairly strong moon. So far we're looking like, okay, this is, looking pretty positive, looking like a positive direction for having children for this person. Okay. Like we would say a fairly strong destiny pattern here. Then we want the karaka. So again, the karaka, the Bhava Karaka for the fifth house, and especially children, is Jupiter. So what's Jupiter doing? Jupiter is in a positive house, right? It's in a Kendra here. And it's in Cancer, right? Because again, if we start with the Lagna, so the first zodiac sign in the Lagna of Aries, then we go, the second house is going to be Taurus, the third house is going to be Gemini, the fourth house is going to be Cancer. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. So 40% fifth house. So that's mostly this fairly strong moon. 40% fairly positive. 40% the sun. Not only is sun exalted, but we've got a swam. This is a super strong sun. Very strong sun here. And Jupiter is exalted. This is a very strong indicator. I mean, it's almost like this person is definitely, you would almost say this person is definitely going to have kids. Now, everybody has free will, so they may choose not to have kids. But this is a very strong so far pattern that this person would have children. Again, if this was a person, this is just some make-believe thing I came up with. Okay. Now, what about marriage? Okay. Well, you can see the percentages here are different. And the reason why is if you look at the last line here, it says, however, because again, this first part goes along with this 80-20 rule of 40% Bhava, 40% Lord of the House, 20% Karaka. However, when, again, this last line here, if the Karaka, if the planet symbol is linked to the Bhava, so for example, if the Karaka is also the Lord of the house, or if the Karaka is aspecting the house that we're evaluating, then this changes because the Karaka has more influence. There's more injection of Bhava Karaka energy into this analysis. So when you have the Karaka linked with the Bhava, then it goes from 40-40-20 percentage, more or less, to 30-30-30. Okay. So the Karaka, when the Karaka is linked to the Bhava, like Lord of the house also, and or aspecting the house or in the house or that sort of thing, the Karaka gains influence. Okay, now I'm going to give you another example after this, but let's just finish with this Aries rising, mock-up chart here. So we changed the percentages here, but now we're looking at marriage. So which house represents marriage? The seventh house. So now we're going to go with 30% seventh house. Okay, so what's going on in the seventh house? Well, we have Mars here, okay, and we have the sun aspecting here as well. Now the sun is debilitated in the the zodiac sign of Libra, because again, we're starting with Aries here. So if we go to the seventh house is going to be Libra. So the sun is debilitated in Libra, and Mars is here. Mars is not particularly strong. Libra is not a friendly sign of Mars, so at best, it's like neutral, maybe a little bit of it's a neutral sign for Mars, so it's not going to get strength, but it's not going to, either way, it's not going to make Mars more positive or negative. But you're going to have these two Pitta planets, so these are two fire planets here in the seventh house. Pitta represents fire, so fire can be a lot of action, activity, but also anger and irritation and violence, even if it's really out of whack, really out of balance. So with this debilitated sun and this, we would say ordinary condition Mars in the seventh house, and these, again, sun and Mars are considered two malefics. You have two malefics and a lot of fire here. This could be a lot of arguments here. A very fiery, but also unstable. I mean, both the person, the person we're analyzing, which is going to be the first house, that's their house, and the seventh house is going to be their partner. Both of these people are going to be super fiery, but the native, the person represented by the first house, is going to be a lot stronger because you're going to have Sun exalted and Mars swa. So this could be like a lot of like power struggle dynamics and fighting, arguing, if not verbally, if not even physically, frankly. So that's not looking super great for a very, I mean, if you're looking for that kind of relationship, go for it. But, that's not a lot of stable energy there. Okay, so the 30% seventh house not looking super great for, a happy, easy, flowing relationship. Okay. And the next thing we want to look at the Lord of the house. Well, the Lord of the house in this mock-up chart is going to be Venus, because Venus rules Libra. Okay. So what's going on with Venus? Well, Venus is in here, has gone to the 12th house of losses and expenditures. So the Venus is in a negative house. And Venus it is exalted. So there's some strength here because Venus will be exalted in Pisces, which will be the 12th house in an Aries chart. But it's with Saturn. And Saturn is the planet of obstacles, delays, chronic issues, that sort of thing. Okay. So Venus is a bit of a mixed bag. I would say overall, it's, this Venus exalted might give something like a partner who's foreign because the 12th house represents foreign places and Saturn also does that. But this could also be like, like long distance or isolation sometimes, that sort of thing. Again, long-term difficulties here. I mean, a lot of passion and fire because of the Sun Mars on the 1-7 axis, but overall, there's going to be problems. And then the thing is, so now Venus, because it's Lord of the seventh house, that's 30% of this analysis. And Venus is also the Bhava Karaka for the seventh house. I mean, not the seventh house, but the seventh house, but also marriage or spouse-like partner. So the thing is that like this Venus is actually going to be 60% of the analysis here. Yeah. So, at least Venus exalted, so that may give something, but, with these two malefic fire planets on the seventh house and Venus on a negative house of losses, expenditures, and Saturn on it, marriage is not looking so great. I mean, there might be a marriage, but it may not go well, or there might be periods where there's distance or isolation, separation, that sort of thing. So you can see, like, how we do this, right? Now, again, you want to make sure you don't confuse Karka planet breaking house, because it might seem like if Venus, for example, was in the seventh house, that might seem really great because Venus is Swa in its own sign of Libra or Tula, which is good. But with Venus in the seventh house, that would give you a Karka of Venus. And again, it sounds good when you have Venus in the house representing the same things that the Venus represents, which is the seventh house. It sounds good, like more good stuff, especially since Venus is a benefic planet, natural benefic. But again, it's that Karka Bhavanasha where it's almost like there's too much energy there, and that can cause problems. Not necessarily between the native and the spouse or partner, it can be, but it could be long-term issues, um, chronic issues, maybe finance or physical, medical, or whatever for the partner. There's still going to be issues there. Okay, so just don't confuse that. All right. So again, we've got this 80-20 rule, and we've got this, when the karka is linked to the bhava, you break down the percentage differently because then the karka gains more influence in the analysis. All right. So let's look at another example on the next slide. Okay. So this chart here, this is a chart of a client I have, and actually I just did the analysis with them last week. So this is fresh, info here. And again, this is a private client, and they've given me permission to use their chart, for teaching purposes. I never give enough information. When private clients give me the privilege of using their charts to help teach and educate people about Jyotish, it's always by permission. And also, I never use identifying details so they can't be identified, but I appreciate their generosity in that way. So here's a real life person here chart. So how do we evaluate? Again, you got to choose your area of life. And we've got our 80-20 rule here. So normally it's 40% Bhava, 40% Lord of the House, 20% Bhava Karaka. However, if the Karaka is linked to the Bhava, we change the percentages. So the Karaka is going to be more influential. All right. So what do we have here in this chart? You can see at the top, there's in the Lagna, Ascendant, Rising Sign, First House. Again, all different names of the same thing. We have a little 8 in the corner. And again, the Lagna is the top diamond in the middle. Okay. The little 8 in the corner represents the 8th zodiac sign, which is Scorpio or Vrishika in Sanskrit. Okay. So we have a Scorpio rising chart here. Vrishika Lagna. Okay. Now, if we look at the same things we looked at in that little mock-up chart, so let's just look for children here and look at marriage and see what we see. So if we look at children first, what do we notice? Well, Jupiter is the Bhava Karaka for the 5th house, but you can see that Jupiter is also the dispositor, the lord of the fifth house here, because Pisces is the constellation of the fifth house, and Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. So we're not going to use the 80-20 rule. We're going to use the 30-30-30 rule here. Or you could, I guess what, 33.3, 33. It's just, more to type. Okay, but you get the point here, 30-30, okay? So we're going to use the 30-30-30 rule here for this chart for children. So let's look at again, we look at the house first, 30%. What's going on in the house? Well, there's no planets there, but we have two planets aspecting the house. Saturn, which is Swa, or in its own house in Capricorn, so a very strong Saturn. And we have Mars aspecting the fifth. So we have two malefics, one super strong, aspecting the fifth house. So that's not looking super great. Since Saturn is Swa, there may be because Saturn's so strong, there may be a possibility of having children here. But, two malefics, it's not looking super great, frankly. Okay. Then we look at Lord of the House. Lord of the House is Jupiter. So what's going on with Jupiter? Well, this is amazing to me. So Jupiter's debilitated because it's in Capricorn. Okay, so Jupiter's weak that way. It's in a negative house. It's in the third house. Although the third house is like a mild Dushtana. Dushtana is a house of suffering. So it's a mild house, and also the third house is a Upasthana. So um, it's a house that improves over time. So Jupiter's debilitated. It's in a negative house. What else do we have going on with Jupiter? It's there with basically three malefics. I mean, we've got the super strong Saturn, we've got Mercury, and we've got Ketu. Mercury's more likely a malefic here because it's with these two other malefics and just Jupiter, which isn't very strong. Because Mercury can switch its natural state from benefic to malefic depending on the planets it's associated with. So I would say Mercury's a little bit more on the malefic side here. Okay. So Jupiter's debilitated with three malefics. And if you look at the degrees here, you can see that there's actually two planetary wars within a few days. There's in this third house here. So there's a planetary war that happened a few days before this birth, because you can see Mercury's very fast, and Mercury's just a few degrees past Saturn. So Mercury just zipped past Saturn a few days before this birth. Now, I still consider planetary war energy if the planetary war has happened, within a week before or after the birth. So Mercury was just in Saturn, and Saturn were just at war a few days before the birth. Then you can see Mercury's coming up to Jupiter. So a few days after, and again, Mercury's super fast. So even though it doesn't seem like, oh, there's like 7 degrees, 8 degrees difference, within a few days, Mercury's going to zip past Jupiter. So within a week, Mercury's going to ride over Jupiter. So again, Mercury and Jupiter are going to be within a degree of each other. And that's going to be a second planetary. So there's two. So Jupiter's debilitated. It's in a negative house. It's with three malefics, and it's basically in the middle of two planetary wars, which is known as Graha Yuddha in Sanskrit. That Jupiter is toast. Okay, and Jupiter, again, we're counting that not only is the lord of the house, but again, the Bhava Karaka. It's all about. So, shockingly, this person had a child, and the child is still living. They're an adult. However, the child was born with a lot of medical problems and had to have like a kidney transplant and all that, has genetic conditions and ongoing medical issues. Which, again, it's a miracle, frankly, that this child was even born and survived to adulthood. But you can see with all this negative influence, again, shockingly, a child was born. I think it's because Saturn was Swa. Saturn is combust, actually. So, it might also be that the Saturn Swa in its own, Saturn Swa, even though Saturn is combust, it's going to make the lord of the house that Jupiter is in strong. Okay. So again, it's, and this person also had multiple miscarriages and things like, which is not surprising given this chart. It's actually surprising they had a child that survived, frankly. The rest of it is not surprising. Okay. Now let's look at marriage for this person. So, marriage. So, are we going to use the 80-20 rule, or are we going to use the 30-30-30 rule here? Well, marriage. Um, the Lord of the seventh house. So we look at to evaluate marriage. We would look at the seventh house. The Lord of the second house is Venus. So Venus, the Bhava Karakas, is linked to the house. So we would use the 30-30 rule. Okay, so let's look at the seventh house, 30%. What's in the seventh house? Nothing is in the house. No planets in the house. No planets aspecting the house. So it's kind of, it's kind of neutral. The 30% seventh house evaluation piece is neutral, which means Venus is even more important. And you can see, since Venus is the lord of the house, it's going to be 30% evaluation or influence in this kind of analysis here, and 30% of Venus because it's a Bhava Karaka. And so since the seventh house on its own is neutral, basically the entire seventh house for this person is entirely based on Venus. So, okay, what's going on with Venus? Well, Venus has gone to a positive house, so that's good. However, however, Venus is also combust. It's so close to the sun, you can see the degrees here. Venus is so close to the sun, it's eclipsed by the sun. So when we see Venus eclipsed, that typically means that somebody has a spouse or partner that they don't see too much. Okay. Combustion is considered a weakness. Okay. The other thing is that if you notice the degrees here, Venus and Mars are almost in the same degree. There was a planetary war a few days before this person was born between Venus and Mars. So there were actually, I've never seen a chart like there were essentially three planetary wars in this person's chart. I mean, that's like, wow, that's a lot of conflict. And you can see all the planets are in the second house of family and the third house of siblings, and there was a long history there. So Venus has gone to a positive house. Okay, so, at least there's some hope. Venus is combust, weakness, dragging it down. Planetary war, it just got out of planetary wars with Mars. Planetary wars destabilizing for both planets, even if it's the winner. And Venus is with two malefics, Sun and Mars. So, also, by some miracle, this person did get married. It did not go well. They told me, and what I told them, and then they confirmed, I told them, because the sun, it kind of like that mock-up chart I showed you where sun was exalted and Mars was aspecting, so Swan Mars and sun, but you basically had the two fire planets on the 1-7 axis, and I mentioned there would be a lot of fighting, potentially even violence and stuff like that. So we have the two fire planets in a dual fire sign. And this combust Venus is just kind of squashed by all this fire. So two fire planets and double fire sign. And the second house represents, again, family, inner circle, but also oral communication. I was like, you guys are probably fighting nonstop all the time. And you couldn't control it because this is like uncontrollable fire. Fire, fire, fire. Like almost like this little fire, 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 escape. And she said that's exactly what happened. She's like, we couldn't stop. There was no way to stop the fighting and arguments. So they ended up getting divorced, which is, again, not super surprising here. Okay. So, again, real life examples, real life people, and how you can use the Bhava Karakas to get more information. So you could see if you didn't know about Bhava Karakas for a chart like this, okay, and you just looked at the seventh house and Lord of the seventh house, again, in this chart, because it's all linked to Venus, essentially, you would probably understand that there was some difficulty here. But you wouldn't understand to the extent of the problems necessarily. Okay, so that's how all this can be helpful to you in interpretation. Okay, so there you go, Bhava Karakas, House Significators. As always, I want to thank you for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. I always appreciate your time. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. If you're looking for more famous birth charts to, look at and learn from, I would check out my birth chart archive list 2024 video. I do, as you've seen, I do personal birth chart readings. I do them live on Zoom and with pre-recorded video. If that's of interest, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com. I'm creating this video a few days before the eclipse, and eclipse times is not a good time to get a birth chart reading, so it would be after the solar eclipse. So probably, beginning to mid-October is when I would do a birth chart reading next. Again, it's just too much chaotic energy at this time. Not a great time for reading. Um, but whenever spirit will lead you that way, like email me. And then this last piece here. So I have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about other Vedic arts such as Ayurveda, or traditional Indian medicine, and yoga. And then other paradigms of medicine like homeopathy, naturopathic medicine. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care. So that's out there too, if that's helpful to you. So as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so take good care, and until the next one, namaste.